Hi, I'm David Harrington. Welcome back to another Turkstra's Tips and Tricks. Today we're going to be talking about how to use a tape measure. So we're going to be talking about all the functions of a tape measure, how to use it, and a few little tricks that maybe you didn't know about. So the first thing a lot of people wonder about tape measures is why the tab on the end moves. The reason that moves is because if you're measuring up against something, it will move in the exact thickness of the tab itself, the same as if you were pulling off of something, it will pull out to make up the difference of the thickness of that tab so that the measurement is perfect every time. One trick to measuring between a gap, like if there is a space where you couldn't quite fit your tape measure in, is you can hold the lock on the tape or use your thumb to hold the tape, and you can push the tape against one end and then you can kind of roll the tape measure down on the floor or wherever it happens to be and read your tape measure at the end. The same would work as if you were measuring up. Like if you were measuring up above your head, you could put your tape measure on the floor and you can kind of roll the tape measure out all the way up to where you'll be able to read it at your eye level or higher. And one little tip that a lot of people don't really know about is a lot of tape measures will actually give the dimension of the length of the tape measure itself. So if you're measuring between something and you can't use that method where you roll the tape measure out, you can put the tape measure at one end, run the tape measure to the other end, check the measurement here, and then add the length of the tape measure itself to that measurement, and that will be your overall length. And like I say, a lot of tape measures will give the length of the tape right on the bottom. Another handy feature of a tape measure is the lock. Often they have a solid lock like this and a quick release thumb lock on the bottom. The lock is going to be handy if you're doing the same measurements over and over. Like if you're checking for width on a board, you just lock it in place. You can quickly measure along the side, especially if you're holding a tool or a pencil in your other hand. You can always have your tape in one position. And speaking of locking your tape in place, it's always best to use the lock, especially if it has a quick release lock, because as tape measures can get worn out, the edges will become sharp and sometimes frayed. And so if you use your finger or your thumb to hold the tape itself and let it slide in like that, the side of the tape can actually cut your finger. And I've seen this happen and it can be quite bad. And speaking of a tape measure becoming worn, if you find the end of your tape is worn or it's starting to bend, or the tab is moving more than it used to because it's worn out, if you're doing small measurements, you can always just start from the 1 inch mark and then you work your way out and subtract 1 inch from the measurement. And that's always going to be a good way to have a nice precise measurement. If you happen to have 2 inches of your tape that's worn out, just start from the 2 or 3 inch mark and go from there. So this is an all Imperial tape measure. It reads in inches and feet. For the first foot, it reads down to 30/2 of an inch, and after the first foot, it reads in 1/16 of an inch. Also, on most Imperial tape measures, you'll find every 16 inches, there's going to be a red marking generally for stud location in construction. And in a later video, I think we'll get into actually reading Imperial measurements, also reading metric measurements, and converting them back and forth. A couple things to keep in mind when buying a tape measure are the rivets in the end. If it's only got one rivet, that end tab is not going to remain accurate. You want 2, if not 3 rivets in the end. Also, depending on where you live, it's nice to have metric and Imperial. This is just Imperial, which is fine for most construction in North America. Another thing is how wide the tape is. The tape itself is 1 inch wide. And that's going to be useful if you're doing a lot of longer measurements, because you'll find that this tape will actually go out probably about 7 to 8 feet before it starts to fold off. And if you have a tape measure that's narrower, it's going to break down a lot quicker and you're not going to be able to reach out to measurements. This is a good size all-around tape measure. It's a 25-foot tape. It's a good size. If you want something a little more compact, a 16-foot tape measure is going to work good as well. So using a tape measure, it's a pretty essential thing for projects, construction, anything like that. And you'll find once you realize what a tape measure is capable of, it makes working a lot easier. And like I said, in a later video, we'll probably get into actually reading measurements, reading metric, reading Imperial, converting them, all that type of stuff. And you'll find that that can be difficult at first. But once you kind of grasp the concept of it, you'll realize it's really easy. And you'll find doing woodworking or any kind of projects around the house is going to be really easy and a lot more fun when you can use a tape measure well. And if you have any questions about a project you're working at home or around the house, definitely think about signing up for a free project coach at build-it-better.ca. That's build-it-better.ca. With this project coach, you'll have access to all his tips, his tricks, industry pros, also discounted shipping, and a lot of monthly deals. And remember guys, the more you build, the better you get.